Leafs captain John Tavares speaks to the media about the challenges they may face this season. And we break down the Atlantic Division standings from last season and discuss what they will look like for this upcoming season. So make sure to stick around on this episode of Hattrick HQ. But before we get into all of that, we just want to say that 96% of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you're looking for a home to daily NHL and Leafs content, look no further and go down and hit that subscribe button. But with that said, let's get right into the topic of this video, which is Leafs captain John Tavares speaks out. And as we take a look here, John Tavares was recently at a charity hockey game in Brampton, and when asked about the Atlantic Division, he said, yeah, 100% the competition will be more difficult. The steps that Detroit, Buffalo, and Ottawa, the steps they are taking, you see the talent they are developing and the season some of their guys have had, and the way their teams are growing and the challenges they present. They obviously feel they are ready to start contending and be playoff teams. He also says that we certainly respect what they bring to the table, but we have to be prepared and we expect a lot of ourselves and have high expectations to still be one of the top teams, if not the top team in our division. He also says that's always the goal when you start the year. And I think with the caliber of players we have and the depth we have, we still want to be right there, but we know the competition is only getting tougher. And Mark, obviously, like Tavares has said here, the Atlantic Division isn't something to glance at anymore with these rebuilding teams like Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, all coming towards the end of their rebuilds. I think the Atlantic will be a really tough division for this upcoming season.
Yeah, no, for sure. One thing I really took from this quote from him is you see that he's almost saying, like, we are going to be in this position. We know it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. We want to be the top team. We want to be the best team. And like in previous years, you'd almost see the Leafs almost like gallivant around this thing of being the top team. They might take a team like Ottawa or Montreal when they were in their rebuild for granted. But you can see that he's admitting that these teams are getting stronger. And with that, the Leafs team is getting stronger as well. I think personally, the Leafs could come out on top of the Atlantic Division. I think when you see a fall of Boston and Tampa and stuff, that they almost have that clear way to just be that top team, get home ice. And I'm glad that he's not taking things for granted and thinking this is going to be a little easier for them.
Yeah, and it seems like Tavares has really learned from their losses, which obviously nobody wants to lose, but there's always a learning experience in that. And I think what he's took from this is that they just got to always be on their A game. And I think that's what we're going to see from the Leafs this season. I think, with the team, now their stars are getting more mature. I think, a lot of them are hitting their prime. I think this is going to be a great season for the Leafs, and it wouldn't surprise me or shock me for them to finish first in the Atlantic this year.
Oh no, for sure. That's the biggest thing. The President's Trophy, I'm always afraid to win just because you know the whole curse of the President's Trophy winners never win the cup. So, the Leafs can stay away from a couple curses. I mean, the whole game seven curse, the first round curse, we did break one of those. But, I think they're the top team going into Atlantic this year. I think, overall their depth, their forward stars. The goaltending might not be the best with a team like Boston and then Tampa having Vasilevsky. But, I think overall they do have the best team. I do think they can really fight for that top spot and just kind of make a statement with with these young teams coming up. They need to make the statement, show they're the top, and just not let someone push them over.
It'd be such a Leafs thing for them to break the 67 curse and break the President's Trophy curse all in one season. It'd be just such a Leafs thing to do. But we're going to get into our next topic here, which is how will the Atlantic Division play out this season? And as we take a look at last year's standings, Boston obviously won the President's Trophy last year with one of the best records ever in the NHL. And then second was Toronto, and then it was Tampa, Florida, Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal. Mark, as we take a look back at last season and these stats last season, what do you think, is going to shift in this Atlantic Division this year?
I could see a team like Boston and Tampa kind of regressing a tiny bit. I mean, Boston had one of the best seasons ever last year, but losing a guy like Bergeron and Krejci is going to take a big effect on them. I mean, they still have their defense, they still have their elite goaltending and Allmark and Swayman, But I could almost see them kind of taking this step back. And Tampa's in a weird situation where they didn't lose their top end talent. But when you look at their bottom six talent, they lost a lot of guys like Corey Perry's now gone, Pat Maroon. And it's these guys that were kind of there just to get these almost clutch goals. I mean, Corey Perry gave me nightmares when he was in Montreal and Tampa. So seeing him out of the East is really nice. Out of the Atlantic's even better. But, they're kind of losing all these depth guys and they're kind of adding in these veterans that might not be fully there anymore or younger guys that aren't fully established. So I think those two teams are definitely dropping this year.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there. I mean, when I look at this here, I think two teams that are going to be battling through it this year are the Leafs and the Panthers. I think they're going to be going back and forth for that number one ranking. I think at the end of the season, it will either be the Leafs in first or the Panthers in first. I think, like you said, I think Boston's going to regress a lot. I think they're going to struggle with not having such solid centers as they've had in the past. And I think, I think Tampa, their team's getting a bit older now. And, when you have one of the best goaltenders in the world in Vasilevsky, it's hard to count them out. I think they're probably going to slip down a bit. And I think we could see a team like Detroit or Ottawa even bump one of these guys out of the top four. I'm expecting Ottawa to be in the top four in the Atlantic this season. What do you think?
See, with both those teams, I mean, obviously every team in the Atlantic can't make it, but a team like Detroit, you've seen them add a lot of pieces through. DeBrincat's a huge add for them. They did booster up their back end with a guy like Petrie and Justin Hull. And, they still have Husso and they have James Reimer between the pipes. So I think they're almost my dark horse team to kind of make that big final push. Another team that I wouldn't count out is Buffalo. The biggest problem with them is the goaltending. I mean, Levi's an incredible goalie, but at such a young age, you don't know how much pressure he can take, how many games he can play, and it's kind of a lot counting on him. I wouldn't be surprised if they traded for a veteran goalie or maybe a more established goalie throughout the year, just kind of mentor him and maybe you go 1A, 1B. But I think those two teams are definitely teams I'd watch out for. I mean, Ottawa did get better. They lost to Brinkat, but they replaced him with Tarasenko. The goaltending got better. But I think Buffalo and Detroit are my two teams to watch.
Yeah, and you guys might say here, delusional Habs fan incoming. But, I think the Habs have a lot of young guys that have a chip on their shoulder. And I think that this is a team who could surprise a lot of people this year. The only thing that worries me is the goaltending side of it a little bit. But they did add DeSmith, and they got Montembeau there. They got a few guys there. So I think if one of those guys can step up and be the star goaltender for Montreal, I think they could push themselves up there. I think it's a team that they're not expected to do much with it. Obviously, they came last in the Atlantic last year, but I think this year they added a lot of depth. I think that Montreal could easily push their way up in out of the last place spot, even into the top six. That's where I'm going to put them at the top six. If they get any higher, I'm just going to jump in the lake or something.
I think Montreal is going to stay put right at the bottom of the standings, and honestly, I'm completely fine and happy with that right now.
Nah, not a chance. But realistically, when we look at this, I think we're just gonna bring it up again here. I think the top four is going to kind of remain the same, but I think it's going to switch around a little bit. I think, it's going to be either Toronto or Florida in first or second, with Tampa and Boston in third or fourth. Or we may see Tampa or Boston push down to fifth, and we might see a team like Detroit or Ottawa or Buffalo push their way up there. I think, like we said, I think this division, like all the teams that have been at the bottom, are coming out of a rebuild. And I think that, they're just going to, one of these teams is about to explode and just shock the whole NHL.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hopefully it's the Leafs, and hopefully we do win the President's Trophy and win the Cup, just so we can break the little curse. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, it would just be a typical Leafs fashion, to break two curses in one season. I know it's a bit of a reach, but you never know what could happen here in the NHL this season. But we're gonna get into our next segment here, which is comments of the day, and the comment of the day goes to Lone Wolf Jesse James. He says, as a lifelong diehard Leafs fan, I'm excited for the fans of the Red Wings, Sabres, and yes, even the Sens. All three teams look like they're finally coming out of their respective long rebuilds. The future looks bright in all three markets. Should be a fun and exciting race in the Atlantic. And obviously, Jesse, we couldn't agree with you more. I think, like we just said, these teams are all coming out of rebuilds and they could shock the Atlantic Division this year. And so we just wanted to say, if you guys enjoyed watching this video, make sure to go down below, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before the season starts, so make sure to go down there and hit the subscribe button. But I've been KC alongside my co-host Mark Pye. Keep your stick on the ice.